And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. I'm pleased to welcome Connie Zweig to our program today, here to talk about her sixth book, The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. Thank you so much for joining us today, Connie.
It's really great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an honor. You know, this is a conversation that I do have often with myself, with friends, with family, and it's something that I've thought about throughout my life, actually, aging. And I love that you talk about the inner work of age, from role to soul. Tell our listeners and viewers, what's the book about? What do you talk about? What do you go through in the book?
Well, you know, as I entered my late 60s, Deborah, I realized that I started to feel disoriented when I imagined retiring from my clinical practice as a therapist. And I recognized that many of my older clients had been feeling that. There was a new emergence of the question, who am I if I'm not a therapist, Dr. Connie? Who am I if I'm not an author, if I'm not a writer? And I began to explore books and communities in the positive aging and conscious aging world in order, first of all, to kind of orient myself. And there wasn't much there. I was not able to find really any written material about aging in relation to the unconscious, which is my training and expertise. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the personal unconscious. What is going on in the unconscious? What are our fears and beliefs and attitudes and feelings about aging that we're not aware of? So because my earlier books, Meeting the Shadow and Romancing the Shadow, had really struck a chord with people, I realized that I needed to explore the shadows of age. That is the unconscious obstacles to aging well.
So, what are some of them? Go ahead. So sorry.
Okay.
What did you come up with? I mean, it's so difficult to encapsulate a book that is so well researched and written, but to give our viewers just a little bit, because
yes.
There's a lot to take in here. There's a lot to take in, people.
Yes. But it's also intuitively recognizable, I think. Once you start the book, you begin to realize, oh, these are the questions I've been asking. So the first thing I recognized, Deborah, was that we live in an ageist culture. There is ageism in the workplace. There's ageism in the media. I grew up watching television shows that were contemptuous of older women or made fun of them. And the movies don't have great representation of older adults who are really thriving. And so our housing is age segregated. There's all kinds of messages that young is good and old is bad. And so we internalize that ageism. And from very young kids, some of us may have a positive model of an elder in our families, and that can counter some of the ageism, but most of us don't. I didn't have a single one. So as we go through the lifespan, that internalized ageism begins to affect our mental health, our fears and depression about growing old, our self-image, maybe our feelings of shame about changes in our appearance. There's research now that it actually affects our longevity when we have negative, unconscious images of aging. So I named this part the inner ageist, because when I teach shadow work, I help people to identify something that was unconscious and give it a name and an image. So the inner ageist in us is the part of us that denies growing older and dislikes growing older and resists it and wants to fix it and wants to resist it. And so that was the first inner obstacle that I became aware of that's really epidemic in our culture. And it's a little bit different for men and women, but it's epidemic.
You say in our culture. Clearly, it is prevalent in our culture here in the US, right? Because when I think back to my own family and relatives and where we come from, which is Italy, our elders are honored and we go to them for advice. And very often here, I notice it's just you are dismissed. How can we change that dialogue here? And is it changing?
Well, there's a growing anti-ageism movement now that
Good.
has started. The World Health Organization is spearheading that. There are leaders and teachers of the movement here in the States, but it's challenging because ageism is embedded in our institutions. And, you know, we've discovered with racism, which is a good analogy, that you can't legislate it away because racism is unconscious. It's a bias that's outside of awareness for people who are racist. The same thing is true of ageism. It's an unconscious bias. And so we need the inner work and the social justice work, both.
Talk to me about inner work and about shadowing. For people who don't know, again, for folks who haven't read the book, let's explain to them what that is and what is inner work. Now, when we were off camera, right, I was telling you about, I was talking to somebody about aging, and she was saying, oh, this is what you do. You go a little here, you a little there. And I thought, gosh, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about in here. So people are on definitely two different roads, right, when it comes to aging. I kind of like this one, because if you can take care of in here, you're certainly going to reflect it out here, is how I view it. But let's talk about those principles that you discuss in the book, please.
So for me, you asked, how can we respect elders more?
Yeah.
That is by becoming an elder. So for example, we don't have rites of passage to become elders in our culture. We have a Medicare birthday in which we become a senior at 65. But some seniors are depressed, addicted to drugs, rigid, bitter, regretful about the past. They're not elders. So we need inner work, what I call inner work, in order to cross that threshold from senior to elder. So for me, that means doing a life review and discovering the patterns in our life story. And what requires emotional repair now, because so many people are afraid of dying without forgiving or being forgiven. How can we do that work now? And spiritual repair. What are our beliefs as we approach death? What do we believe now as opposed to assuming that we believe the same thing as when we were 50? What are our images of the divine now? And is there a spiritual practice or contemplative religious practice that we could pick up now in this stage of life? And so that's part of the inner work. And then there's also facing mortality, because there's so much denial of death in our culture. And I would say, you know, the pandemic began to make a dent in that. But in general, culturally, we don't talk about death. We don't acknowledge it really publicly. And so facing mortality is a big part of the inner work. And then what does it mean? What can I do now so that I don't die with regret? So that I die in peace?
How do you start to do that, though? Do you go talk to somebody, read this book? This book is a good start, I'll tell you that, because you're very detailed in it. I mean, just each chapter, you talk about life-changing illness, emotional and creative repair to release past and present, spiritual repair, reclaiming our practices. And I love part 3 in the book. You talk about from hero, right? Like doing everything because you're a little younger and you could, to elder, right? Letting go. there's a lot of steps. You make it easy for us too, because I'm someone, when I'm reading a book like this, I like it in little nuggets. That's what I call them. And you wrote this book in nuggets. Let me ask you about this. Letting go. How do you let go when you're ruminating and you wish you hadn't done something, or something didn't happen? But it's your past. It's part of who you are. How do you start to heal and let go? That's a big one for me.
Okay. Well, you know, there are 3 steps to every rite of passage. So the first one is acknowledging that you're in the beginning of a transition, and then letting go into the uncertainty, and then emerging renewed. So the letting go process in the middle can have many different levels to it. So what you're talking about is kind of emotional and mental letting go, right? And what I really suggest for people about that is to find a centering practice that allows you to quiet your mind so that you have an inner refuge, a spaciousness inside your mind, so that you're not buying into every thought and every feeling that comes up. And once you have that spaciousness, you can begin to watch your mind and learn how it works, and recognize which thoughts are bringing you information and they're important, and which thoughts are noise that's just passing through that you want to let go. But there's other kinds of letting go. My husband and I moved this year.
Right.
We let go of the big house. We let go of most of our furniture and clothing and stuff. And we moved to a beautiful place that's much smaller and simpler to take care of. And I felt liberated. I really felt liberated. I wouldn't have been ready. I mean, 5 years earlier, I couldn't have let go. But when the moment came to step into that, we really did. We really enjoyed the process. And there's other kinds of letting go. I let go of a relationship, a friendship, long friendship that was not supportive for me, that just was filled with too much drama and negativity. And it was hard, but I let go. And so there's all kinds of, many, many processes of letting go. But the most important one, from my point of view, that I explore in the book, is letting go of the doer. The way that we identify with doing and success all through midlife, when we're empire building and creating a foundation for our finances and our families, it's fantastic, right? We thrive in the doer. And then there comes a time when the doer, either we're forced into retirement, or we become ill, or we suffer a loss, and the doer starts to take a different place inside of us. It's no longer primary. And we have a kind of identity crisis. I call it a late life identity crisis, because we don't know who we are if we're not the doer. And so I offer lots of practices for letting go of this part of us, this identity, and moving into a deeper identity. For me, that's a spiritual identity. But
you mentioned the word, go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead.
You mentioned the word in our interview and also in the book, retirement. That's a word I've never quite understood, even when I was a little kid, because I used to think, well, gosh, if you like what you do, why are you retiring? But that's a word that's, in my opinion, a bit overused in our society, because it's like, oh, you got to hit that age. You got to get those bennies. And I think, oh, gosh, is that what we're here for? the big race to retirement? Having said that, though, the buildup, and then you get there, to your point, and it's difficult because you don't see the people you were seeing, right, anymore, whether it's friends or family, and life just shifts and takes such a turn. How can we get into that stage of life with a little more grace, for example?
So this is what I mean by the shift from role to soul.
Yeah.
So our work roles will fall away inevitably. Some people are working now in their 70s, others are volunteering in their 80s. They don't stop doing. But what I'm suggesting is a little bit different. It's that we're doing with a different quality of awareness, an elder awareness or an elder state of mind, which is not the same as the midlife heroic striver, right? So there's less push from inside. There's less illusion that we're in control. There's less attachment to the outcomes of our efforts. There's more of a flow. So it's not how much we're doing or volunteering or working or grandparenting. It's more the internal state of mind in which we're doing whatever we do. That's what I'm offering people, how to cultivate, to get a perspective on that, and then to get the direct experience of how we can actually cultivate the elder state of mind, or what I call the shift from role to soul.
Is there something we should be doing each day? In other words, a practice that will lead us closer to that?
Well, you use the word should. I don't use that in the whole book. I think part of what the freedom of becoming an elder is that we let go of obligations. But there is, for people who are interested in this, there are things you can do every day. I don't know, let me think how to make sort of a universal suggestion. I think my suggestion is to take time for self-reflection.
Yeah.
So it's not time to be a couch potato and do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying stop doing and be a couch. I'm saying rather, there are these practices to become an elder, and they take time. And if we're still rushing and hurrying and striving, we're not going to have the time for them. So if we can slow down and self-reflect with life review, with emotional repair, with some kind of contemplative practice that may be connected to your religious lineage or community or your spiritual orientation, whatever it is for you, because I'm not advocating beliefs and I'm not advocating a particular tradition. The book is filled with interviews with spiritual leaders from every tradition: Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish. So what I'm suggesting is I'm supporting you to find your way to a practice that will encourage developing silence and self-reflection.
You actually just answered my next question, because throughout the book, you do speak of certain spiritual leaders, again, religious leaders, Buddha. You must have done a tremendous amount of research over your many, many years of counsel. Is there anything that worked in particular for you, or was it all a culmination of everything?
For me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I have two lineages. One is Carl Jung and depth psychology,
right,
which trained me to orient to the unconscious and to explore my own shadow and to help other people explore that through dreams and free association and creativity and all kinds of ways. And my other lineage for me is Vedanta, from India, because I learned meditation at age 19 from that tradition. And although my practices have changed, that tradition has stayed with me. It just resonates for me. But that doesn't matter in terms of reading the book, because I'm not in any way even writing about that. I'm not suggesting that anybody else do what I do.
Right.
I'm really trying to present, I want to open doors for people to explore their own journeys in this stage of life.
Yeah, I think that's so critical because, as we know, as we look back at our own lives, it's really not a practice that's very often taught from childhood on. You know, it's all about success and your
Yes.
education. Education is clearly very important, but it's always based on success and the money often that you will get and jobs from that education.
Right.
And we all know that in so many other cultures and practices, that's not necessarily the case. While education is valued, of course, um, the soul is what is also talked about and all that.
Yes.
I just wonder how we get to that shift. And you say you think that is happening now more than ever, particularly with COVID. Have we had that moment to slow down and do that?
Well, this is very individual. I don't think
Yeah,
we can make a generalization about it.
right.
I think for
Yeah,
some people, you know, the quarantining has been an enforced slowdown.
yeah.
And it's left some people very unhappy because they're isolated. And it's left some people thriving, like me.
Hmm.
I mean, I've been able to teach all over the world online. And I wouldn't have been able to travel to do that without the pandemic. I wouldn't have done it. So now I can teach anytime, anywhere. So, you know, I think it's very different for different people. And I can also study. I can take courses from all over the world, which a lot of people are doing now. So it's, you know, and there's a difference between people who are more introverted and people who are more extroverted. So people who are more extroverted, meaning that they get their energy from outside of themselves,
Yeah.
as elders, will be more drawn to service and activism. So I
Hmm.
know many, many elders who are engaged in fighting climate change and other social justice movements now. And, you know, that's been facilitated by Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And fighting for voting rights and all kinds of things. I was very active in the last presidential election online. So, and then there are people who are really expanding their creativity in this time of, you know, where we need to be home,
Hmm.
and picking up lost creative dreams and aspirations that they never thought they'd have time to fulfill. So now they can. One friend said to me, he's 73, he said, I never thought I'd be able to write this novel that I've been dreaming about all my life. And I'm doing it now. And it's thrilling because he said, I won't die with regret.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. If you allow yourself the time, if you give yourself permission, going from role to soul is quite liberating. I know we've all been forced to a certain extent to do that with COVID, right? And I'm someone who I thought was more of an extrovert, but with time alone, I've realized, I don't think so. I think actually I'm more of an introvert than I ever thought I was. And I've taken the time and pause, right? I like that word pause
Mm-hmm.
to learn more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it matters what age you are because we're always aging, right? It doesn't matter which stage we're in because we're always continuing the learning, right, in our lives. Do you
Well,
haven't go?
yeah, we're aging from the minute we're born. But
Yeah,
there is a focus on stages of life, you know, so we're not talking about adolescence and we're not talking about
right.
adulthood. We're really talking about the last stage of life and the extended longevity that we've been given now, a couple of
Yeah,
extra decades. That's never happened before in the history of humanity. So, what are we going to do with that time? And, you know, what I discovered is that every religious tradition teaches that the purpose of that time is spiritual practice. Every tradition teaches that. It's about letting go of the doer and the stuff and the roles and really taking time to turn within.
is there an excerpt you'd like to read to our listeners and viewers? I know I have one picked out, but I'd like to hear from you.
So my emphasis in this book is on the internal, less familiar terrain of soul. The subtle yearnings that appear in images and fantasies, the ways we respond or fear to respond to those messengers, and the symbolic meanings we glean from them. As we learn the practices, we deepen our self-knowledge, and we reimagine age for ourselves, shifting from denial to awareness, from self-rejection to self-acceptance, from obligation to flow, from holding on to letting go, and from role to soul.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you for reading that. May I just read a little excerpt from your prologue that, I was reading to friends because I was suggesting that they take the book on as I was going through it. If you feel lost or disoriented, unable to see what's next for you, if you feel isolated and don't know how to find your tribe, if you seek a new contemplative practice for this stage in life, or if you simply long for something more, then you can find it right here. And by here, we're talking about the inner work of age, from shifting from role to soul. I really got quite a bit out of this book, and I hope that our listeners and viewers pick this up, because you have so much wisdom from all the years that you have practiced and written. Again, this is your 6th book. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with that you'd like to say to them, and how can they get in touch with you?
Deborah, I've been overwhelmed by the response to the book. Yeah. I've just really been so fulfilled and so gratified by how it's touching people. And I think what I really want to say is that this time of life is a gift.
Yeah.
And we're not taught that. We have no guidance for how to live well in this stage of life. And I didn't have any, and that's why I wrote the book. And I'm finding that people, as they walk through all the practices in the book, they change. They're different, and they tell me that. People in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s have told me that. So it's a very fulfilling moment for me. If people want to find where I'm teaching workshops, they can go to conniezweig.com. All the online workshops are listed there. If they read the book and they want to join a book club, we call it a wisdom circle, they can email me at conniezweig@gmail.com and just put wisdom circle in the subject line, and I will connect you with other people so you can age in community with them and read the book together and do the practices together. And there's about 30 groups now, and they'll keep coming. So if that is something that speaks to you, reach out to me and let me know.
Oh, Connie, that's fabulous. I may do that myself, because that would be very therapeutic, helpful to all of us. I know I'm there right now contemplating and talking about this with my friends. So that's fantastic that you offer that. Thank you so much, Connie Zweig, for being on our show. Please, everybody, pick up The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. It's a terrific read. It's also an easy read. What do I mean about that? You can just take little bits at a time, marinate in that, think about it, and then pick it up again. That's how I like to read the book, and I recommend it highly. So thank you very, very much. Please reach out to Connie, and thank you for joining us today on our show on Deborah Kobylt Live. If you could stay tuned to the end, we do have a sponsor right here. It's called Sambuco. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Deborah.
Thank you.
There's nothing more important than taking care of yourself, and if you're not feeling your best, you can't be your best for anyone else either. I've been using Sambucol to help support my immune system, and I've noticed a huge difference in how I feel. I'm more alert, I have more energy, and I believe that's because Sambucol is powered by nature's superfruit, black elderberry. It's good for me, and it's combined with vitamin C and zinc, too. I feel that Sambucol really helps to keep my immune system strong, particularly during these times. And they have these super delicious all-natural gummies, powder to add to my water, chewable tablets, and a syrup that tastes amazing. Get 15% off of your order of $9.99 or more at Sambucol.com. Use DEB15 for your special 15% off discount. That's Sambucol.com and mark down DEB15. And